Yeah, but good choice, Perry. You really weren't there yesterday? Aren't you a cheerleader? I swear to God, all of them look like you. Damn it. Hey, come here. When do you gotta do that? I'll get the test for you. And then just copy it. Copy it. Like, you can take the test during that.
Alright, so if you could all take out a separate sheet of paper for me, we're gonna start off with a nice little bell ringer. Bell will work, warm up today.
Criminal, yeah.
Heard it called by many different names. All of them work, mean the same thing. What? No, this is just for you guys. I got an exit sticker that you'll be turning in later.
Are we putting this in?
No.
No, I wasn't paying attention.
Alright, so. We're gonna have about 5 minutes to answer these questions. A couple of these came right from your test. The third one is an opinion question. I'm gonna call from a couple of people of a mixture online of in Zoom and in the class. So, please begin. Circle around the room, make sure you're doing what you're doing, not being on your phones or anything like that. Actually, I can't have it on. You online kids see me well? Can I get a thumbs up? Not very clear audio, but thanks Robert. Do you at least know what you're supposed to do? So I want you guys to answer these 3 questions on the board right now and then pass them in the chat so I know that you did it. Alright, thanks Robert.
This is why I leave it now. Especially next year. Why didn't it just wait till you drive? Because George Washington suggested that.
Yes.
It's just like paper.
Yeah, good.
Oh, yeah. Becca? George Washington. He's only 9 years old. Brandon's older. Oh, we did it.
The 14 point, weren't you? Or was it?
Dating in 19.
You guys got a couple minutes left?
When did you guys have it? It's not a date.
Go.
Washing machine.
Whoa.
Washing machine.
Washing machine?
I said, because we want to get involved, but, it's not.
The point of it's to rehash what was in the last. Alright, well, that's gonna change this unit, right? Well, now we're in person for this entire unit, so your score's gonna go up to at least 100.
At least?
Yeah, they did. It's like literally
Oh.
No, we didn't.
That's what I got wrong.
No, we didn't.
We didn't?
We
That's
didn't.
one of the questions that I got wrong on the test.
I said yes.
Oh, good job, online kids. Luke, Cole, Robert, appreciate it, thank you so much. I will be calling on one of you to share your answers.
Hey, can I see one of the tissues, guys? Just throw it at me.
Oh, I.
I know one of them.
You guys got a minute left?
The 20th Amendment, yeah.
Should be plenty of time for 3 questions.
Cross. On the test, I thought it was, what century did the women's rights thing happen? Not what amendment did it.
You put
That was
20.
one off, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the answer to that question?
19th.
I got that one. Here you go. Coach.
Really?
Well, I'm retaking it. You got an F2.
You guys got about 30 seconds
Oh
left?
my God, I see you.
You guys got F's?
Yeah, not me.
No.
Does everyone feel confident in their answers?
I gotta see.
No,
I'm gonna
no,
that's
no,
it.
yes.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
You're the first one we can call.
Yes, call on him.
I will.
Oh my God, that first is class.
No.
One point away.
Well, I would definitely just write it down.
Shut up.
All right. All right, everyone. Eyes on me. Turn on your seats. Face forward. Low. Thanks. All right. Number 1. Did America join the League of Nations? Explain why they did or didn't. Trevno.
Oh gosh. No, America did not join the League of Nations because they didn't want to get involved in European affairs and because George Washington said he was involved with them.
Wonderful. She said America did not join the League of Nations because we didn't want to be tied down in European affairs. And then decided to use contents in her answer and cite George W.'s farewell address, saying that we should not get entangled with foreign affairs. Brilliant answer. Thank you. That is correct. Number 2. Did America sign the Treaty of Versailles? Let's go with Robert Grant. Can you answer that question for us? Number 2. Do you know why do we not sign the Treaty of Versailles? Thank you. Your answer was right. Can I get a why?
Because it would have some issues between us and Germany, and there was very harsh consequences in there.
Partly right, yes. He says we did not sign the Treaty of Versailles because it was harsh consequences on Germany and it would lead to a lot of trouble. Those answers are correct. I would add on to that Wilson was a Democratic president at the time. He goes to Paris to get the treaty all signed, has his 14 points, Europe rejects him, and they're like, we'll do one, and that's the League of Nations, but that's it, that's all you're getting. So he's like, fine, he's all disgruntled, he goes home, then has a stroke. And he's bedridden, and then his wife takes over to be secret first lady of the United States for a bit. But then we have a Republican Congress, and even back then, Republicans and Democrats didn't always see eye to eye, shocker, funny. But they didn't, and Congress's job is to ratify all treaties. So they didn't ratify the Treaty of Versailles and signed a separate thing with Germany from that. Number 3. Let's go with Joe.
Go.
It's an opinion question, Joe.
Does not go, Joe.
It's Joe. What is number 3? In your opinion, could these decisions have any consequences?
Yes.
All right. What consequences might happen? It's an opinion. Just pull out of your brain with the context. Think about World War I.
They could go to war with Germany again.
Very good.
Now, very good, Joe. They could go to war with Germany again. And guys, guess what? In about 20 years, that is going to happen. Because of the Treaty of Versailles, America not joining the League of Nations leads to a ramp up in war again. And that's one of the main consequences that's going to happen along with the Depression in the 30s. I mean, the people who were wronged in the Treaty of Versailles, like Italy, Japan, Germany, they're all going to be the quote-unquote bad guys in the next war and be really angry with all the good guys and cause another war. You guys remember this political cartoon from last week? Cross showed us this one, a nice bridge with America being the keystone for the League of Nations. Yeah, some of you remember. I see you nodding your heads out there. Well, we didn't join the League of Nations, causes a huge domino effect which leads to the World War II. Now let's start in today's lesson. So, look at your guided note sheets. I'm going a little bit out of order. We should be doing the Red Scare first, but I really wanted to jump into the 1920s. So skip the first 3 sections on your guided note sheet. We're starting with the economic boom. So the very last bolded point down there. Now, let's get talking about the 20s that everyone wanted to happen again this century, and it just didn't start out very well. Alright, let's click on this, and now let's do it. There we go. Welcome to the 20s, everybody. You like jazz? Jazz? Thank you for the either sighs or giggles, I couldn't tell which. So, we're talking about the 1920s. I'm just gonna let Pat for a couple more seconds since it's good. Alright. Economic boom. Gotta remember, America, after World War I, the 20s, big, huge boom. We came out like the heavy lifting champion of economics. And this time period, we explode and boom economically. Politically, we're kind of like now with the rest of the world and focus on ourselves. You'll see we'll take a few steps back in this time era. As well as socially, we're going to have a bit of a strife, a tussle. You're going to see some conflicts of old versus new, modernists versus traditionalists. Some Victorian era versus the lost generation. All this is going to happen in the 20s. Big changes happen on the social level. So, like I said, America exits World War I as that economic heavyweight fighter. Like we're 1-2 in everybody. Because you gotta remember, we didn't fight a war on our soil. We fought in Europe, so we're just like resting easy. We don't have to pay for repairs or trying to fix our economy or anything like that. We're relaxing easy, collecting paychecks from both Britain, France, Germany. Because remember, what of the 4 reasons did we get into the war that involves money? You guys remember that one? Loan and repayment. We paid loans to both sides, correct? We paid that $2.7 billion to the Allies and the $27 million to the Central Power. Well, now we're collecting on that. It's time to pay Uncle Sam. So we're just getting relaxed as our economy increases and we're getting paid by everyone in Europe. So, Americans who were rationing during war now had capital investments spent. We're rolling in dough. We're like Scrooge McDuck jumping into his money vault and swimming in there. America was owed large amounts of money from both the Allies and Central Powers, like I told you about. And now, universities now had business schools to train competent business leaders. So, it's not as much as pulling yourself up by your bootstraps type of thing, like you have with Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and everyone like that. We now have universities to train you how to do the businesses, how to do the negotiations and the deals. Yes, sir.
Were there still monopolies going on?
Oh, very much so. Roosevelt didn't get rid of all of them with his trust busting activity, which some of you put for economic stuff and the test for the SAQ. It was really good. It was a good answer. If you explained it well. I gave you a point for saying trust busting. So, let me tell you in numbers and dollars how much we increased. In 1895, the average annual income was $95. Not bad for 1895, I have to say. Not good for today, but $95 is a respectable amount. But then in 1918, average annual income was $586. Students, is $586 more than $95? Yes, by a lot. So, in a little over 20 years, our annual income increased dramatically after World War, well, even before like at the end of World War I, and a little bit after before. People had more money to spend, and they surely did. People were rolling in dough and spent like they had all the capital in their back pocket. Consumer spending went up significantly. People were buying products left and right. Some things they didn't need, some things they just wanted because now they had the money to do that. The U.S. economy increased by 34% between 1922 and 1929. 7 years. In 7 years, our production and economy went up by 34%. Now, how did they spend it though? If you had all this money and were living in the 1920s, how would you spend your money? Quinn, how would you spend your money in the 1920s?
You
Give
What
me
did
a
he say?
school appropriate
Oh,
answer.
when's the fun? Vacation.
Vacations, yes, yes. How about like go on anything entertainment wise, like some sports balls?
Yes.
Yes, of course. Maybe a car?
Yes.
Well, yes. We have not only new technologies, but expansions into every American. Expansions to every American. Sure, it's a bit weird, my bad. But if I go back to this, universities now have business schools to train competent business leaders. We now see those business leaders starting new markets. We have automobiles, you know, we got Henry Ford, we got electricity, Edison, Tesla, light bulbs, Tesla coil, telephone. You can see the picture down there, the beginnings of the telephone. You speak into this end over here, it captures the vibrations, kind of acts like a telegram wire, and it sends the vibrations to this weird
Really?
contraption where it spits them out, and then you can listen in here.
Muffin don't come with it, but.
You guys have probably seen old cartoons where it's like 1920s, 1930s, and they got the phone here to listen and speak into. Those are real. Having some trouble back there, trouble?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
I was just trying.
Oh. We have chemical companies. Do you remember those chemical warfare weapons we used in World War I? Yeah, mustard gas, burned your lungs, caused really painful things to happen. We're gonna start investing into chemical companies and looking into that type of stuff. We have radios, which was big and huge. It's like when the TV came out and people could actually buy it commercially. It was like that but for the 20s, because now you can listen to all the important news in the world, or sports information, or fireside chats from a very specific president right there in your home. You didn't have to spend a nickel on the newspaper every day. It was a wonderful invention for back then. And appliances like the refrigerator, eventually an ice machine in the 50s, a toaster. And these type of inventions would cause the keeping up with the Joneses effect, which we'll talk about later, and we even still have it today. But know this, a bunch of new technologies came out because of the industry's rapid growth and expansion. Speaking about automobiles, that Quentin really wants to buy a new automobile. The assembly line created by Henry Ford. Hey, you guys know Ford, right? That company's still around today the last time I checked. Well, he was a huge competitor in the automotive industry and revolutionized it by the assembly line. By the assembly line. Know those two words. Assembly line. So, Ford's plan was to train workers to do one job that they could perform at a rapid pace all day. So it would be like a conveyor belt, and you'd have one guy who was just doing tires. He's like, pew, 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 just doing tires the entire day, screwing in the nuts and bolts on those tires. Then you had another guy put in the steering wheel, and another guy put it in the brake pedal, because those are important. Another guy installing the windshield wipers. That's what people would do day in and day out, and would just increase their efficiency in production because they were getting so good at it, you know? The repetition theory, if you do something over and over and over and over again, eventually you just know it, or you get really good at it, like solving a Rubik's Cube in under a minute. So, this led to lower costs, because you don't have to hire so many workers to do one job. Now you got a couple of guys who are just doing tires and are really good at it. Increased productivity, because people have done it over and over and over and over until they bang their head on the wall, but they're able to do it really well. Unlike if you just hired Joe Schmo off the street and told him to do tires. He'd probably look at you and hold the screwdriver backwards. And it lowered at consumer prices, because now the demand is so far up there that supply is so far up there that demand can finally catch up and they can lower the price. And it increased demand, like I said, because now we have all this extra supply. It's not taking us a day to make a car, it's taking us 20 minutes to make a car. And if we're putting out a car every 20 minutes, we have a bunch of cars left over. And that means people can now start buying these cars that weren't available beforehand because they were so expensive, because they took so long to make. and higher profits. So it was like a win-win-win from everyone. The consumer win, the workers won, and the business owners like Ford won because they were making money, people were getting cars, people were getting paid. The assembly line. Train workers do one job repeatedly over and over, extremely effective. And a fun fact, Ford dominated the mortar industry, but you want to know what their like one little downfall was? Color. Ford, there's a famous quote from Ford saying you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black. So GMC would later come in and would offer cars in multiple colors, and that would outsell Ford because people like to personalize themselves and be like, I want the purple car. Give me the purple Model T. I do not want to kind of see a purple Model T. That sounds kind of exciting. So, because of this in the assembly line, income and wages increased. We won. The progressive era actually helped. These workers are finally getting their due, getting their pay. They're making money. Unemployment falls. Because now you can hire, again, any Joe Schmo off the street, get him to work on tires for a little bit, and then he understands tires, and then he's a professional at tires. So it was no longer you had to be a skilled worker and study blacksmithing for years under your father and then move on to your uncle who taught you even more about blacksmithing. To become a famous blacksmith, you could be a Southern or Eastern European who came off the boat and pick up a wrench, and after a couple of years you're really good at screwing in tires or the steering wheel. And because of this, skilled workers aren't badly needed. More people qualified for jobs. Like I said, you're not from birth anymore a carpenter or a blacksmith or a cobbler. You're now just a regular dude walking off the street who's poor, and we're just like, sure, can you hold a wrench properly? And you're like, is it like this? You're like, it is. And then after a couple of years, they're professionals at what they do because of the assembly line. So, increasing investments towards research and technology and energy. Oil and electricity are huge during these time periods. I mean, I already told you about Tesla and Edison. I mean, eventually we're going to have an entire world fair lit up with Edison bulbs. And eventually we'll have the Tesla coil and just huge investments in further electricity like alternating current and direct current, which will help power things, because that's what electricity does. A lot more people investing. So we have more money now. So what people usually do with that excess money, like all you guys are doing now with investing in GameStop and AMC and Nokia and Dogecoin, people are now investing their money into the stock market. So the pros is more money available for expansion. Our economy is going to grow because more people are dumping money into the stock market. The cons is citizens borrow money from the bank to invest on the stock market. So they'd be going over to Mr. Bankman over here, and I'm just like, I need a $300 loan. And then I take that $300 loan, and I go over to the stock market here, and dump it all into the stock market on Ford. Sure, on Ford. I put it in Ford stock. And they were hoping to get that stock to be $1,000, where they would then eventually sell it, and then they could pay back Mr. Bankman with a little bit of interest and keep a nice little square change for themselves. Spoiler alert, this can have negative consequences around the year 1929 because of the crash. Now, advertising. Advertising becomes big. We've talked about yellow journalism and political cartoons and propaganda. It's time for businesses to start targeting you guys psychologically. They know how you think, how you feel, how you want to feel. If you think advertisements are bad today because of the groundwork these advertisements laid back in the 1920s. So ads appeal to people's needs, frustrations, and anxieties. I mean, they would make national oaths. There's like, you want to look like that buff dude down there? You want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger? Eat your national oats, and then eventually you'll be so buff you'll bench press 350 and feel like a total stud. Listerine, 1920s. Profits over 100,000, and they were the kings at selling you what you wanted to sell. It wasn't about selling you the product anymore. It was about selling what you wanted. Selling what you wanted. You had a headache, Listerine fixes that. Have a sore throat, Listerine fixes that. You want your body fat to wash away with a soap, Listerine. Your breath smells bad, your girlfriend won't kiss you, your significant other won't kiss you, Listerine. And it worked. Because in 1927, over $4 million in profit. They figured out what made you tick and what made you hurt, and they poked at it ever so slightly to make you buy it. These products could be anything they wanted it to be with a little bit of advertising. You're not doing so well in the bedroom? National Oats. Need to put on some weight? National Oats. Want to lose weight? National Oats. You want to sell jewelry? Put a pretty woman from the 1920s in a nice glowing yellow dress. You want to sell flour? Put a cute picture of an adorable little baby child. Okay, it was adorable by 1920 standards. I mean, baby child, yes. Hey, that's not the child labor is God. You can't buy children. So, now I talked about the stock and people making all this money. How are people able to afford all those appliances and cars and light bulbs and radios? Well, you guys heard of layaways and installment plans today? Someone shake their head, please. Thank you. I see it. There you go. Yes. So, allow consumers to installment plans allow consumers to buy goods on credit by paying a small amount of money. Initially, they paid off the remainder in monthly installments. Has anyone just straight up paid off their entire phone bill or their entire phone? Really? I'm proud of you, first of all. But usually, you go up to pay for your phone, and then they tell you how much they're going to charge you over a period of 2 years, right? Plus an activation fee, plus whatever plan you're on, like the unlimited data family plan / whatever. That's what it is. That's that. That's like when you go to buy furniture off layaway and they say we want $1,000 up front and then you pay the other $2,000 off in the course of 5 years. That's what they did here. With these plans, people with modest incomes could buy goods that would otherwise have been beyond their reach. So it was a good thing. But then it also led up to Keeping Up with the Joneses effect. Have you guys ever heard of Keeping Up with the Joneses? Joneses is, a couple of you. Quentin, what's Keeping Up with the Joneses?
Basically, it's where it's a imaginary family that always has the latest stuff, and that you want to get that stuff.
Right. The Joneses is just a very common name. It's like saying John Doe or Jane Doe for unidentified body. Joneses, very relative term. How many of you have the new systems, the PS5 or the Xbox Series X? Anyone online?
I got it. Both of them.
Anyone online having the new systems?
Did you win it? Answering
I won it from the
Anyone
no
online?
no plate for hate.
Even a no will work for me right now. Alright, thanks, Robert. Anyways, alright, I have the new PS5.
Oh yeah.
What?
I'm not
Baller.
trying to flex, this is actually for this lesson. So, it's not, like, while it's good, it's not really worth it at the moment because there's what, 2, 3 new PS5 games that are for that generation?
Yeah.
The rest of them are just patched games like God of War, that just got a new one, and Call of Duty is already there. But
Red Dead 2.
Red Dead 2 eventually, maybe. Let's pray for Crouch because he wants Red Dead 2 on the PS5.
That's the weather game.
But you're just having those games patched over. I'm buying into something that doesn't have the economy yet. But I'm doing it because I know that's going to be the norm and I want it. Like Quentin said, it's the family that has the newest and greatest and you want it. You want the newest car, the newest phone, the newest Gucci shoes, the newest Supreme brick. Sure, Supreme brick. You want the newest consoles because you know that's what everyone's going to have. This is how I try to keep up with the kiddos. Hello, my fellow kids. Now, that's a little bit on the advertising and economic end. Let's talk politics. So, like I told you, Wilson's all stroked out on the bed and they lifted him up and took him out of there. So we need a new president. And his name is Warren G. Harding, Republican. Warren G. Harding.
Last name, you know Warren G?
Never heard of him.
It was a
Yeah,
clear
I mean,
black
there's a
night.
reason,
A
because
clear
if you look
white
at that,
moon
it's not
over
very
Jupiters on the streets,
visit.
trying to consume.
So, he wasn't a very sophisticated person or a politician, really. It was just an average, everyday man. I mean, that's him right there. Look at that guy. Look at that face. He doesn't know where to look. So, but what's important about him is he coined a very important term called normalcy. You guys have probably heard of it before, talking about after the 50s and World War II. But it's when referring to American society and life before World War I, and meant to say we're returning to normal. We're coming down from the height of war, all businesses making guns, machine guns, and stuff like that are done, and they're slowly coming back to making cars and bread and clothing. It's returning back to how normal life was before we got into this war spike panic. No more food stamps and rationing. It will happen again, like I said, after World War II in the 50s, when we all try to move to the suburbs and live a normal life. Now, this regular guy over here, Mr. Warren G. Harding, also had friends who were lesser officials from Ohio, who took advantage of their friendship. He got them positions in D.C., Senate, Congress, higher positions in Ohio, gave out some money, and they were known as the Ohio Gang. Kind of scandalous, not supposed to do that. You know, give all your friends who supported you, and we're just like, I was the right tackle in high school, man, you mind helping me out? He did things he wasn't supposed to. He gave away positions, money to his friends in Ohio. Like I told you, Warren G. Harding, 1921 to 1923. Is that a very full presidency? No. It's because he dies of a sudden heart attack in 1923. Whoopsie. He gone. But he made a cool word, and he did some scandalous stuff. Other scandalous stuff involved Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall, the Teapot Dome scandal, which is a scandal about oil. I was asked the question of, is monopoly still around? Yeah, and they still have their fingers in the government, a little bit. You know, just bribing the secretary to ask for oil leases to private companies, or for private companies. That's what they did. They're like, we'll give you $1,000 if you give us oil to use on our steamrollers to pave the way for roads. And that's why, what do you think this is supposed to represent here? This contraption of a teapot wheel? Steamroller, yeah. That's what the teapot is called the Teapot Dome scandal, and the oil was used to fuel to prevent the metal on metal rubbing to pave these roads, and the oil scattered was going to run over all these regular people to get to the White House. Again, very shady. Ohio gang shady, this shady. I mean, is taking bribes ever a good thing? Okay, well, you guys would be fair. You guys would fit right into politics then.
How do you think half these guys passed the class?
Yep.
So, like I said, Warren G. Harding, he's done. He's dead. He had a sudden heart attack. Poor dude. Had a cool word. But how about another cool guy? Calvin Coolidge. Silent Cal, as they call him. This man had loved the tremendous American prosperity during laissez-faire capitalism. Can someone tell me what laissez-faire means? Really? No one? We talked about it in the Gilded Age.
Yeah, it's,
Quentin.
is that French?
It is French.
I'm sorry, I don't speak surrender.
Go ahead. Oh, very funny.
Francis, say
Yes, yes,
let it be.
yes.
Say let it
Good
be.
job. I'm so proud of you.
Francis, I'm
Hands
gonna
off
answer all the
capitalism.
questions
Remember
for
that
you.
thing that we did in the
I'm
Gilded
gonna
Age
answer
where
all
we're
the
just like,
questions for you.
all right, big
Then
business,
you
do
raise your
whatever you
hand
need
and
to
answer.
do. I'm just gonna stand in the corner and pretend like I don't see what's going on. That's exactly what we did again. We took some steps back from the progressive era and we just let big business run the show. Because, like Calvin Coolidge said, we had some tremendous American prosperity during that time, so he wanted to do it again. He also talked about isolationism. Now, if we didn't sign the Treaty of Versailles and didn't join the League of Nations, and I told you during the 20s and 30s America was isolationist, what do you think, what can you infer isolationism means? Isolate by yourself, correct. Isolate and by yourself. We put on the blinders to anything outside of the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. We were just like, rah, America. Everything could be painted blue for all we care on the world map because America was all we saw. So we withdraw from European affairs, like not signing the Treaty of Versailles, not joining the League of Nations. You should probably remember this for your test readings, by the way. We steer clear of foreign entanglement for a little bit of that. We listened to old G-dubs, like Churchill told us about in his farewell address. Don't get involved in foreign affairs. So we did it. But that being said, we had a very specific definition of isolationism. Isolationism comes only in the form of military. We will not get involved in any war, send any troops, or get involved in any military action. Politically, we will not have alliances with Britain or France. We will not make alliances. Those types of ideas. But economics is an entirely different statement, different question. We love trade. We love money. And you still have to trade with other nations to get that inflow of capital and raw resources for our manufacturing plants. So economics was fully on the table. We could trade, we could do whatever we want for these countries to get their raw materials here into America to then produce more. That's Silent Cal. Good looking guy. I mean, look at that suit. Fancy chair. Political cartoon has something to do a little bit with what we talked about. The sources better keep to the old channels. What do you think this political cartoon is trying to tell us? Right. Right. What does this ship kind of look like to you?
Titanic.
The Titanic. And what does those look like? Correct. So what happened to the Titanic?
It's sunk by an
Iceberg. Thank you. It's sunk by an iceberg. So this is saying to avoid getting sunk by these icebergs of foreign entanglement, treaty with France and Paris, foreign treaties, League of Nations, we should return to the old channel of. We should just return to the old channel because I'm going to ask you the question: do you think this is a pro-isolationist view or a con-isolationist view? Do you think it's pro? What? Con? You don't think this is for isolationism? It's pro. So it's pro-isolationism. It's telling us we should return to the old channels because the Titanic is going to get sunk with messing with foreign powers. I'm going to remember this one. Definitely put this on your test.
Are you creating those?
Maybe. So, that's all the political stuff out of the way. You got to learn about Harding, who died in a few years, and Calvin Coolidge, who was a cool guy who liked laissez-faire and isolationism. But now let's talk about social. I told you about the lost generation at the beginning of this PowerPoint. I know it's probably not on there for some reason, but please write down somewhere the lost generation. You're really going to remember that. The lost generation was names that vets returning from World War I gave to American writers, and a lot of the generation took up that name. The lost generation is a cohort of people. Please get off your phone. Thank you. The lost generation was a cohort of people, the generation of people who basically missed World War I. They missed the biggest event in human history besides the Big Bang and the dinosaurs dying from a meteor. Because they couldn't fight in the biggest war. They couldn't get into the draft. So these lost was being referred to directionless, unspirited, not knowing where to go in their life. And the vets who returned from this war basically gave that to these writers and other people being like, well, this is what we did. What are you going to do with your life? These American writers, Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, probably heard of Mr. Fitzgerald. He gave us The Great Gatsby, a great book. made it to a couple good movies, got turned to this meme. But these writers were very critical of civilization in general in American society. They were disillusioned by society and politics. They were disillusioned. I mean, can you blame them? Government's in the pocket of big business still. People in society still not being treated well, even though we got rid of child labor and got past the 19th Amendment. People are still not being treated as fair. So they were disillusioned by all that.
The Lost Generation, that was a nickname given to the vets from American writers.
No, so vets returning from World War I nicknamed it, it was given to the American writers. Other way around.
Okay.
Vets called American writers. That is phrase a bit weird. But it's Lost Generation means directionless for the people because they couldn't fight in World War I, so now they're asking. The vets are now asking again, what are you going to do with your life? What are you planning on doing? I just fought in one of the greatest, one of the scariest, biggest wars in human history. What are you going to do?
Take a nap.
Take a nap?
Take a nap.
I mean, some people slept with the fishes. We'll get to that later. The mafia becomes a thing soon.
Ooh, that's fun.
So, a quote, morality was just a lie told by the government. Morality, and this quote is saying that we the common people have to practice what the government will never do, which is care about people and view humans as actual living things and not numbers and stuff. Just caring about people. It's a lie told by the government. That's how they felt with all the political stuff going on and what was happening in society. They also thought industrialism was crushing the human spirit. That big business is putting the worker down and not allowing people to express themselves and be free. So like I said, Fitzgerald gave us The Great Gatsby and then eventually this amazing meme. Hemingway, though, wrote this. I was embarrassed by the words sacred, glorious, and sacrifice. We had read them on proclamations. How for a long time, and I had seen nothing sacred, and the things that were glorious had no glory, and the sacrifices were like the stockyards in Chicago. If nothing was done with the meat except to bury it, abstract words such as glory, honor, courage were obscene. Some powerful stuff. Does anyone want to
What's
give?
The Great Gatsby? I've heard of it, but I
It's a
don't know.
book. It's a book about about 1920 society. Rich guy falling in love with a girl. It's a good movie. You can watch it. You don't want to read the book. You can watch the movie. It's also really good. Does anyone want to try to take a guess or a gander what this quote could mean, or like to them what they think it means? You want to go?
It's kind of like just saying how the war shouldn't be glorified, and just how glory inside was compared to how they were saying it. I don't know.
That's really good, especially if you read that the book was called A Farewell to Arms. It's really good. It's saying that these words that they grew up upon and were used in war, like sacred and glorious and sacrifice, had no meaning to them specifically. How were they supposed to achieve this glory? What are they supposed to sacrifice? The words to the Lost Generation had no meaning like it did to people in the Victorian era, people returning vets from World War I. And it lost its meaning to them, what it had to those people. So, besides this quote, he was considered one of the greatest American novelists. He wrote about whatever interested him. He talked about war, bullfights, hunting, fishing, love, and violence. He was also a severe alcoholic. He moved to the Key West, Florida, and Cuba, and would eventually commit suicide in 1961. Hemingway also fought on the Italian front for Italy. He fought for Italy, but still is an American citizen. Kind of weird, if you think about it. But a great theory that he had, because he was a award-winning novelist, like I said. He had the iceberg theory. You guys know icebergs, right? They're bigger on the bottom than they are on top. Well, he was saying that he wrote about different things because your writing should be able to be deep by being seen on the surface level. You should be able to look at the surface and read it to understand the deeper meaning. Not be like, well, of course the red door represents the death of the mother in Shakespeare of this certain play, and you're have your language arts teachers go cuckoo. It's like, no, you should be able to read the book and understand the deeper meaning by just scratching the surface. You shouldn't have to go looking for every metaphor and simile in there. Just a fun fact to have. Now, more social stuff. The Harlem Renaissance. Very important. Please remember that. It will definitely be on your test. The cultural rebirth was centered in Harlem, which is a city, and was brought together a group of talented writers, composers, musicians, and artists, and entertainers who trumpeted the cause of the new Negro, who was assertive and proud of his or her African heritage. This was basically African Americans embracing who they are and showing it outwards in new things like music and dancing and writers. They were embracing their African heritage, embracing who they were, and weren't trying to hide too much in the shadows. Langston Hughes, considered the leader of this Harlem Renaissance, was a famous African American poet who won many awards. And he wrote about the African American culture, not for himself or not what represents himself, but represents the culture as a whole, which is why people think which is why he was considered the leader, because he was the first one to do this. He was writing about his people and their heritage as a whole, which led to a lot of people to do the same music and art and dancing, which is entertainers and dancers. Very important. This is a rebirth, a resurgence, or not a resurgence, a renaissance of people embracing their African American heritage. The Charleston is one of these dances, as long as the Harlem Shake and dances like that. I like to call it the TikTok dance of yesterday. Now you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but
You're crazy.
I might be a little crazy, but you guys do these fun dances that the old people are always just like, those darn kids, they don't understand what they're doing. Why don't they go to college or focus on their schoolwork and get off my lawn? Well, and you guys are just like, we're just trying to express ourselves. It's not going to let me play it. It makes me sad every time. Remind me before class is over to play the Harlem Shake or the Charleston video. It's really, like, the dance is always good. But that's the same thing that happened for these days. You had the old Victorian people who were like, you must have your background where straight books on your head, 6 inches apart, leave room for Jesus, and we waltz. And we waltz. But these guys wanted it to be loose and free and shake their feet around, and girls wanted to show their ankles, which was terrible at the time. Oh no. Absolutely, you scandalous beings. How dare you?
Can you imagine taking someone from the 1920s to now?
They probably suffer a heart attack.
Probably die.
But this was one of the clashes in the cultures, like I was telling you about. Traditionalists versus modernists. Victorians versus new generation, and just like today, of boomers versus zoomers. You're having these clash of ideas of what dancing is supposed to mean, or how it's supposed to be from official to loosey-goosey. Don't change. There we go. Jazz. Like jazz? Remember that clip, the music I was playing for you in the beginning? Was jazz by Louis Armstrong. This, very important, was the first cultural America phenomenon that we did not steal or borrow. This wasn't an offshoot of something that was already European and given an American twist to it. It wasn't something that we found in an old culture and was like, oh, we like that, and made it ours. No, this was purely American. It started in America, and it spread out, and then to the rest of America, and then out to the world. Jazz spread throughout America and would be adopted by white musicians and audiences. Everyone liked this. Even if it started with African American culture, it didn't stay there. It was embraced by white people, which is great. It could be improvised. It was meant for liberations, and for both the artists and audiences to symbolize the time also. It was something that could be easily adapted. It didn't have to be one thing. I played you a clip from Louis Armstrong this morning of the music, as well. Duke Ellington is another popular jazz artist. Good music, very important. Jazz, probably a true-false question, was jazz the first American culture phenomenon? I want to remember that. Jazz, first American phenomenon, was great. Meant it spread for not only African Americans but also white people, and spread throughout the rest of the world. And was the first pop culture. So, where would these shindigs happen? You had clubs. This was the Cotton Club, where all these musicians and dancers and people who wanted to embrace African culture would come together and dance the jazz, doing the Charleston or the Harlem Shake dance, the jazz. You have Langston Hughes, who I was telling you about, the famous African American poet. And you have a great depiction of what the inside of these clubs might look like, of people dancing and jazz music, and people having a good time, embracing their African American heritage. Movies were also a thing. Do you guys remember the Century video that we played last week? Where it was talking about the build-up to World War I, but also mentioned movies that were the realistic flicks, and then fiction. We have more fiction coming out. You got Mickey Mouse, you got The Sheik and Lone Chancey. You have slapstick silent films with The Kid and Charlie Chaplin. If you haven't seen any of Charlie Chaplin stuff on YouTube, it still kind of holds up to this day of kind of the slapstick comedy, which was comedy through like physical humor and stuff, like you get slapped across the face.
Did the Three Stooges come out in the 30s or
30s. So, you have actresses like Greta Garbo, Rudolph Altino, Al Jolson, Clara Bow, the Marx Brothers, Charlie Chaplin. And if you look at it, there's a couple of women on there, isn't there? Remember the 19th Amendment got passed? Women now have a greater role in life. They can now take more of these jobs. They're still not equal to men, but they have taken a great step forward. And I talk about women because our next slide should be new women. Would you look at that? It's like I've given this PowerPoint a few times. New women, known as flappers, which was a derogatory term given to them back then, but it was what they were called, so we still talk about it today. These new women were confident after World War I, coupled with disposable income. They also had money they converted, because remember, they took jobs while the men were gone during WW1. They had increased presence in public area, and they not constricted by Victorian norms. They rejected what their parents and their mothers thought of what was supposed to be Victorian, the long skirts and the corsets and the sun hats. They would show their ankles, they would smoke, they would drink, they would gamble. Men were scared that they might turn into men because they were acting so much like men because they were drinking and smoking and gambling. But they were having a good time and they were expressing themselves. They challenged gender roles and rejected their mother's ways in favor of individualism and modern choices. That clash of modernism versus traditionalism. The clash between Victoria era and the lost generation. No corsets, no long skirts, showing off ankles, dancing, showing off shoulders. I mean, look at that. Have any of you guys or gals gone against what your parents' wishes of maybe you wore something they didn't approve of?
Nope, I'm a good child.
Well, I'm a good child too, but we've all been rebels once. I have a story about rebellion. It's the one time I ever did it, and now if I look back on it, it was probably really dumb. I could have just asked. But I snuck out to go to the movie theater, driving movie theaters with my friends. Don't remember what the movie was, so it probably wasn't that good, or it was old. But it was a good time. My dad was away at work, he works midnights. My mom was asleep, it was 11:30, almost 12 at night. We snuck out, went to the movie theaters, throwing popcorn at the screens, doing whatever kids did like 3 years ago. And I got back, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, I had to open the garage because the key, how it worked for us, is we put the key on the inside of the front door and keep it locked like that. So you can't just unlock it and then go through the front door because someone will know in the morning because it's unlocked and the door's always locked. So that probably already woke up my mom, or she was already awake when I left. military crawled up the stairs, did a barrel roll into my room, and slunk under the blanket and went to bed. And then that next morning, all my stuff was gone. Like my TV was gone, my computer was gone, all my consoles were gone. I still had my iPad because I needed that for school here. I was one of the first kids to have iPads here. And there was a very angry note on my desk. And I was in big trouble. But it was fun. I probably could have just asked to go to my friend's movies later that night, but I didn't have a driver's license at that time either. That was my tale of rebellion. So, obviously, for those who say that you didn't rebel, it's a lie. You did something that made your parents mad that they didn't approve of, that you still do. Like maybe what they question you, like, why are you watching people play a game when you can play the game? Or why are you streaming on YouTube or Twitch? I don't understand you young people. They'll never understand.
People ask questions like why do you watch people play video games?
Yeah.
So the easy answer is you can have them waste their money on a game, so that way you can see if the game is worth it or not, and you don't spend money.
I just always bring up the thing of football. Why are you watching people play football when you can go play football?
Not
Now, I
the
told-
same. Not the same.
Not the same. So, I told you about prohibition and crime, huh? Well, the crime. You guys remember the temperance movement when that crazy nun lady with the hatchets was chopping up all the alcohol barrels and destroying bars because they were tired of men getting drunk and then coming home and taking out their bad day on their significant others? Well, America was just like, we hear you, we get it. Alcohol, of course, is the problem for everything. So we took it away. Alcohol and the consumption has roots with the U.S. temperance movement in the mid-1800s. I just told you about that. The temperance movement, crazy hatch lady chopping up all the alcohol barrels. With the quote of, "No power on earth has such influence to terrorize and make cowards of men as the power of liquor," or liquor power. Just saying that liquor makes men do really crazy and dumb things. This was the 18th Amendment, by the way, that took away alcohol. No more alcohol in America, we're dry. But if you had something that you've always had taken away from you, what are you gonna do? Take it back, sneak it in, just do it anyways? That's what these guys did. Many drank in illegal saloons called speakeasies. These are like little underground places where you knock on the door 3 times, give a password, and give the bouncer $10 to let you in. And they still exist today. There's one in Seattle and throughout the country where you can go to these speakeasies and they've been turned into like high-class bars because of the history behind them. But they're hard to find. They're like the type of things where it's like go down this back alley, down this flight of stairs, make 2 rights and a left, and then knock on the door. Like, they are hard to find, but they exist out there still. And are very popular and expensive. So, like we said, if things are made illegal, you're just gonna do it anyways. This led to an increase in crime and lawlessness because if things go away, people are gonna find a way to make those things like moonshine and sell them to you and make a profit on it, which leads to the underground crime. Basically, this amendment led to the mafia in America and like huge crime syndicates in America because they had something they could easily profit on and make. It was very difficult to enforce. I mean, we all know that if you get something taken away from you, like if you can't just walk up to a smoker and slap away their cigarette and be like, no, and then walk away and they're just like, yeah, okay, and they take out another one and put it in their mouth, like, watch me. Like, it's just not gonna work. It's difficult to enforce something, especially when people have been drinking alcohol longer than they've been drinking water. You gotta remember, when these guys got off the Mayflower and landed here, all the drinking water was bad. Or they didn't have ways to purify it or find it, so they were drinking beer more often than they were drinking water. And plus alcohol was a lot more potent back then. So, organized crime, like I said, came from this because they could make it and sell it, and ran away from the cops and got people drunk in these speakeasies. I mean, where do you think the speakeasies got the alcohol? From the crime syndicates. So then it took a few years. It was called the Great American Experiment because we immediately repealed the 18th Amendment with the 21st Amendment. The 18th Amendment was just like, no alcohol. The 18th Amendment was like, well, JK, what were we thinking? Of course you know. You have people, this is a peaceful protest for wanting beer. You have people have doctor notes to try to get some alcohol. Like today when people try to get medical marijuana doctor notes. Funny how history repeats itself when something is illegal and people want it. But yes, from this like, you need to remember, I mean it's legal now in Arizona and Colorado and a few other states. Gotta remember, 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment. 18th Amendment was prohibition. 21st Amendment was JK, just kidding, alcohol is okay. Now, talking about sports. Like I was telling Quentin earlier, people want to see the sports balls because they have all that disposable income, they have radios, they want to be entertained. Entertain the people. Or the famous quote from a movie that I can't remember right now. Or are you entertained? Key sports figures dominated their sports and captured public attention. First-time athletes crossed over into mainstream homes because I'm telling you, they have radios. They can turn into 99.9 The Mountain, and they can hear the Dodgers play at the stadium. I don't remember which one, but the stadium. You finally could live the American dream of having a hot dog in one hand and popcorn in the other and yelling at the Red Sox. Most athletes usually had regular jobs and not paid in season. They got paid very little, so don't view it like as $1 million contracts today. It's more of like you got to play, you got some money for doing what you love, now go work in the factory. The iconic period for baseball, boxing, and college football. There is a great movie called Cinderella Man, which is at the tail end of the 20s into the 30s, about a boxer who goes from being a big shot to then going into retirement, and then you see a beautiful scene of them having all this luxury and a nicer apartment and watches and tuxes. And then the next scene is all that goes away and they're living in like a base room apartment. Their china is bad. The wife only kept like a pearl necklace because that was all she had left. She didn't want to give it away. The dad just in bird lines, the boxer's in bird lines and is going to the job, going to every job he can and try to get one. Great movie, made in 2005. Now, what could have gone wrong after all the great things I told you about? Politics is like, nah. Economics is skyrocketing. We're shooting for the moon, and we have some social clash, but that's fine. Well, guys, the stonks fell. All that investing of taking from Bankman and giving it to the stock market, just people buying on credit, all of that fell flat in our face. It was egg on our faces. We didn't shoot for the moon. We didn't hold. We crashed. Dogecoin didn't pay out in this version of society.
It is gonna pay out.
I believe. Black Tuesday. Very important day. The beginning of the Great Depression. October 29th, 1929, the stock market crashed. The 1920s marked great prosperity for America. Stock market expansion. And then we fell flat on our face. How could this possibly happen in 9 short years? From being economic powerhouses to now being a whimpering kicked puppy because we're struggling to keep our people alive. Well, overproduction and expansion. Because the assembly line and being able to get all those cars out, like one every 20 minutes, we now had way too many things. Too many things. And now people who already had those things weren't going to go buy another car. If you had a car, you weren't going to buy another. And people were starting to be able not to afford cars because of the crash. So now you have all these cars sitting around on the lot not doing anything. We also have cars sitting around on the streets too because eventually gas gets to be so high you can't afford to pay to put gas in your car, which I have to do after school too. I can't afford to put gas in my car either. So, too much buying on credit, the credit card. People were able to do that so easily. People who only had a couple $100 were buying on credit for things that were $500, $600 and not paying it off. And if you don't pay things off, that's bad. You go into debt, try to take out a loan from bank guy again to pay off the debt, your loan, and it's just a spiral of debt and loans and debts and loans. Too much credit buying stocks. Like I said, take out $300 from the bank, try to invest it, hopefully you make $1,000, pay off the bank, walk away with some cash. Didn't work out. Bank was spending all their money, all the people's monies who invested there on stocks that weren't going to pay out. High tariff stock trade. Our president put high tariffs of all the incoming stuff that we had. The only thing that we were allowing in, because remember, isolationism, we were okay with economics, but we put high tariffs, so then countries had to pay high prices to get their stuff shipped over here, so then we can produce it, or turn it into the raw materials to produce things. Most companies overproduced, like I told you. Ford made so many cars that people either already had a car, didn't need a car, or couldn't afford the car. Now all these cars are sitting here. Many countries depended on the U.S. This is going to look from a world history perspective, but our economy suffered, everyone else does too. Remember, you guys remember who made the foreign policy dollar diplomacy? Not Woodrow Wilson. That was moral diplomacy. Taft. Who said Taft? Awesome. Yes, Taft. Remember, invest with the dollar, not have the big stick like Teddy Roosevelt. America invested into all these foreign markets, and we invested more so into Germany after World War I, so they at least had a leg to stand on as they shoveled themselves out of this huge hole of debt that they had. But then once we crashed, and our dollar meant nothing, every other industry that we invested in crashed. Spain and Portugal, England, France, Russia, Germany, Italy, India, all that crashed, all gone. And that is the end of our PowerPoint. Now we have an activity we have to do, and I have an exit ticket for you guys to do before we leave today. It's called the Instagram activity. I'm gonna have to explain it, Tress. I'll explain it once you guys